So during the course of my videos, I have been fumed, my soaps were even drugged, where I have had irritated skin, rashes, what would appear to be allergic reaction from soaps I've been using for years. I've been covertly drugged. I've been on and off psychiatric medications, powerful, potent psychotropic drugs, okay? Sometimes antipsychotics. They've gone to great lengths to make me sound gay. I've spoken with a lisp at times. They have chemically castrated me, dehydrated me, sabotaged me, hit me with frequencies. Okay, my ears would start ringing. When a friend came to visit and I described what was going on, they experienced the same thing, being in the same room with me. It's on record, okay? This person testified after coming to, they witnessed my targeting in various ways. They were witness to various aspects of it, to the internet when they're talking to me on Google and so on and so forth, and Google Hangouts back then. And they witnessed the slowing down of videos, I believe, something else. And when they came to visit me, okay, they also noticed the frequencies that they were being hit with me. Now, the frequencies make it hard for you to think. It's hard to really describe how that works. It's kind of a ringing in your ear, your headaches, and inducing these kinds of things, okay? And of course, there's patents. It's well recorded. They also have caused pains in my body and so on and so forth. So this goes back to kind of speaking in a similar way that I am right now, which is natural to a certain extent, the idea of being relaxed and communicating. But this particular form that comes off as a geek or something is unnatural. Let's think about diversity in Africa. Part of the reason why all African tribes aren't capable of the same degree of martial arts prowess. The diversity in culture. Diverse versus the university. University versus diversity. University teaching people in one way to give certain people who have cultivated their reproductive cycles with the epigenetic considerations, of course, to their advantage, right? The upper hand, right? So this is also what's called taking advantage, which also has to do with rape, right? When you take advantage of a woman, in a drugged up state of mind, okay, you're basically raping her, right? She's intoxicated. Now think about, even if they were not drugging anybody, just simply the university alone is basically like the people, the whites, the Jews, and some Asians, generally speaking, are taking advantage of any women they have sex with. Just that alone is taking advantage. Because those women don't truly understand the difference between the forms of intelligence they have and the other people. They don't understand the worth of people, and they are taught with psychology and by the people who are seen to be the most cunning, the most intelligent, right, the most intellectual. They're taught in this kind of way to downplay the worth, to see other people as less deserving of their affection and less attractive. Now, once you factor in all the drugs and the coercion and the threats, and so on and so forth. It's like a woman who's been accused by the Inquisition, who's decided to sleep with her oppressor on the off chance that he'll release her and sympathize with her. Okay, she's sleeping with him willingly, right? But of course, it's consensual. It's not the same thing. It's a form of coerced sex. It's insane not to see it that way. So let's look at the environment. When was my first diagnosis, for example? I was about 13 years old. I was diagnosed with depression with slightly psychotic features, and this has everything to do with me beginning to see myself as a gang member and starting to smoke marijuana and starting to disassociate to a certain extent, right? That's part of what our culture, what American culture is causing people to disassociate, kind of Western cultures. They're kind of the cultures of the world at this point, really. If you don't insist on reality and point to the martial art order, the true martial art order, the Sun Temple, pure masculine spirit, followers of Horus, the hardware and so on, holders the elder, then you're basically causing people to disassociate with reality and see things a different way. So in that sense, it is not just the people at the universities, it's not just whites and Jews and Asians in America, it is pretty much everybody to varying degrees taking advantage of women, okay, and people they have sex with. Okay, so, when you think about pederasty in ancient Greece, 5th century, 4th century BC, ancient Greece, right? Why would the parents allow their kids to, sleep with these older adults, right? They've changed their perspective, and they're taking advantage of the family and the children. So we go into environment, okay? The first diagnosis, right? I was about 13 years old. Now, let's consider what led to this. I moved out to a ranch, you know, in the mountains in the middle of nowhere when I was 12 years old. Within a year, I am smoking marijuana and acting like a gang member. You can't make this up. Within a year. Okay, the change of environment, boom. Also, it's that stage in life, right? Child development. So there's kind of Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory with some truth to it, right? The development cycle, right? And the change of environment. How could any psychiatrist not consider this? Well, the fact is they don't do enough research into any individual patient to even consider the elephant in the room. It's a complete fraud. So when we go to, and even when they start to use technology to define things, these are people with a long history of eugenics and reinforcing white supremacy with kind of liberal ulterior motives as well. Okay? It's insane to think that just because they have some technology that claims to scan your brain effectively, that is exactly what they're showing. The symptoms of schizophrenia that are in the brain scans could simply be the symptoms of being a man. It could be the symptoms of adverse thought that creates a certain brain scan. It doesn't definitively prove anything. Once you've defined the behaviors by the symptoms and you look at the DNA, you could very well be defining the genetics of the superior man who is ostracized and targeted by society. These are the genes of schizophrenia. Right? And only if they follow suit with their impulses and their proclivities and natural tendencies to be adverse do you then say, hey, this guy's isolating himself, he's thinking differently, and so on and so forth. And they've demonstrated time and time again the ability to put voices in people's minds. So this, you can pretty much throw out anything psychiatry has to say ever. As long as it's outside the divine order, and when I die, it is. So psychiatry is definitively a fraud. Its validity depends on me being in charge and establishing the divine order. When I'm dead, it's all ill-gotten gains. You can't trust them. You're better off trusting a serial pedophile with your children. So moving on. So that leads me to the age 14. Okay. When all these things start weighing heavily on me. Okay. And it goes to the age 15. Where I'm sent to boarding school. Okay, and there's females there that are cute. That one of them thinks I'm cute but rejects me. There's various, basically an islander, a black female, females from an Indian female, various females from various races. One of them was an Asian female named Kenya, and then the president later on, is part Kenyan. I thought that was an interesting coincidence. Anyway, so obviously I think there's more to it than that. But so over time, I dropped out of reform school. Again, the boarding school. The environment was very hazardous. Okay, that leads me to high school in Morgan Hill, where a female breaks my heart, and eventually I carve this broken heart when I'm in a mental hospital in Idaho. Okay, into my forearm, beneath my wrist. Okay, and so my first actual girlfriend was right before that, and she was an Indian female. She was a rich girl, and she thought I was very handsome and so on. A lot of the females at Live Oak said I was handsome. Some people said that that's kind of the new guy effect, but I go as far as say it's the handsome new guy effect. And because it's a small town, there's 2,000 people in the school and so on, a small town and so on and so forth. Me personally, I don't entirely buy it because I had a crush on her the whole time I was there. I didn't kind of get used to seeing the same faces and forget about my crush, so I don't entirely buy that explanation. Anyway, eventually that leads me to reform school. So you see there's the shifting environments, right? I believe it led me to Cornerstone Christian School first and then reform school. So there's 3 or 4 different high schools leading up to the reform school. Okay. And there's a lot of interesting experiences I went through there, CEDU, and eventually I get kicked out of there for smuggling in weed twice. And I get sent to northern Idaho, where it's very cold. It gets 60 degrees below zero or something like that. And, at times. And so I'm freezing, I'm miserable, new environment. It's like the second time I've ever been in snow in my life. And, eventually I go through the motions of putting a belt on my neck to be taken to Coeur d'Alene, to the mental hospital there, where I convince my parents to take me back, and I start acting like basically a complete, like a house nigga to get taken out. Okay, and so then my parents were like, "You're on Depakote at that time," and they were convinced that this is a miracle drug and so on and so forth. I've convinced them many, many times. I've talked to them many, many times and told them, "Hey, that was what I needed to do to get out of that mental hospital." And it's stupid to think that that doesn't factor in. So moving on, I dated right before that, when I was at the Christian school, before going to school, I dated a sheriff's daughter, and the sheriff's deputies are the ones who kept taking me back to the psych ward. So there's a connection there. You can there's assumptions that can be made one way or another. One is that they foresaw that they were going to play the mental health route, and they kind of try to make it up to me ahead of time. Another way to look at it is that through that pissed them off, and it made it so that they were pitted against me. There's different assumptions one can make. Leading up to 19, when I had a girlfriend in Santa Cruz, basically I didn't really lose my virginity, definitively until I was 19 years old, which is absolutely a disgrace. Women were shunning me. There's no excuse for it. Okay, there's no excuse for that being their culture. This is not a martial art culture that insists on people waiting for marriage. This is California in the 90s. In the 90s, they had no excuse, not even the beginnings of an excuse for shunning me my whole life. Absolutely, I used to, I went on the internet looking for women. I chased women just about as much as the next man. Got rejected, embarrassing. I was different, shy because I'm different, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we move on to Yahoo, okay, and Google, right? The search results, they made it hard for me over time to get the articles I needed. I'd find them, and I'd search the article the same way, and I'd go through 10 pages of search results and not be able to find the article about prescription pills as the leading cause of death and so on and so forth. So basically the psych ward's attitude was you leave as a beta male or you don't leave at all. The idea of put them against the wall, right? Put them against the wall to execute them. It's a saying, right? Put them against the law, the wall backwards. That was basically the idea of the state, to make me operate in a way that's outside of the law. So now I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen. Basically, December 2nd, 2009, a couple months after I began my first video, officially Illuminati Part 1, where I talk about Isis, Horus, and Amun-Ra, I'm touching on who teaches who and why, who was more intelligent and civilized during that time period, and why. And martial arts, of course, Horus, Har, and where. So I said Isis, Horus, and Amun-Ra, and we'll get into that later. Okay. Illuminati Part 1, Ancient Egyptian Wisdom Stolen by Ancient Eurocentrics, or something like that as a title. I have, that channel came down. I have other channels where I reposted it. So, this December 2nd, 2009, I bought throwing knives. December 13th, white Tai Chi sword. December 20th, all 2009, straight katana blade sword, right? It's really a ninja sword. December 20th, 150-pound crossbow with laser sight. December 20th, pack of 5 bladed broadheads. December 20th, 5-pack of aluminum arrows. December 21st, 47-inch medieval 12th century Templar sword. December 21st, House of Flying Daggers prop sword from the movie. December 21st, deluxe 6-tier wall mount for swords. Okay, with a Buddhist man holding the sword. So you see that well before I make my martial art challenge, the emphasis is on the hunting and killing, the warfare and killing, right? These things can be used for hunting, right? The crossbow can also be used for warfare, okay? 2010, January 2nd, 2010, traditional blue katana, cat, Anna is Earth Mother. March 10, 2010, 5-pack of aluminum bolts. See, it shows you that I've been using these arrows. They've been kind of getting deformed. I needed to buy new ones. So yes, I was training martial arts and related activities for precision striking and so on and so forth. Well before my 2012 challenge and my December 20th, 2013 challenge, which was my 4-year challenge. So March 10, 2010, Mohican, right? Hip arrow holster. So when we look at 9/11, I'll end it with this. It was basically a military neocon led an all-party-backed elite globalist statement communicated through the occult. So no one believed them because they're conspiracy theorists. Number 1, trade center, military support. Number 2, underdog strike. 3, trade route influence, sexual behavior, ISIS rape. 4, religious, social, political order considered. So I had to kind of rush through that. Listen to it again. That's key.